see you again, everything that I don't.
And you are listening to The Monitor from KPFT in Houston. I'm Otis McClay, the normal co-host, sitting in for Mark, who is off today. And with us from the great Commonwealth of Massachusetts is Evan Kenney. Evan has been on before. As you may remember, Evan was a Ron Paul delegate who was elected by the Massachusetts Republican Convention to serve as a delegate in Tampa, and then he was removed because they didn't like it. And then he, in Tampa, appealed that decision, and I think you were reinstated?
You could say that.
I could say that?
Yeah, I was reinstated. What happened was there was a kind of a kangaroo court kind of trial, kind of a little hearing, and they don't really have to follow any rules. So what happened was they reinstated some of us who were kicked out, not all of us, and they picked the ones that looked good for them. So I was the 18-year-old high school student, and that looked very good for them.
Yeah, that looked good, like they had some young people involved.
Exactly.
The times that we walked over there, I don't think I saw anybody under 50. At the convention. I guess there were a couple people, but it did seem to have a sort of a, and I cannot deny that was also partly true of the Democratic Convention.
Sure.
Although the Democratic Convention was, I think, a lot more of a rainbow. Republican Convention tended to be pretty ethnically pure, so to speak. Well, anyway, so now have you graduated college yet?
No. I just finished up my freshman year. You
finished your freshman year, so you're still there and doing journalism, right?
No, that's pretty close actually. It's not political science. It's film video production.
Film video, okay.
Yeah. It has nothing to do with politics.
Nothing to do with politics, and yet you ran for what is called the school committee there in Wakefield.
That's right.
And
up here I'm now a school committeeman in Wakefield, Massachusetts, which means I handle three things. I have three main jobs. One is to hire the district superintendent. The other is to create policy for the schools, and the other is to manage the roughly $30 million budget for our school district.
For your school district there in Wakefield. So what's just out of curiosity, what's been your experience serving on the school committee?
I've had a blast. I was always vocal when I was in the Wakefield Public Schools about school issues, about student issues. I was a student rep to the school committee, so I sat through 2 years of meetings representing student issues. And I'm very lucky in Wakefield. We have a group of people who really care about the schools. They don't care so much about political advancement. They care more about the schools, and we all get along. It's actually nice. I'm a Republican.
Did you run as a Republican, or was this a non-denominational election?
It's a nonpartisan race, so you didn't be on the ballot. But it was pretty widely known, thanks to press like yours, that I was a Republican. And now sitting on the committee, I find myself agreeing most with the biggest Democrat on the committee. So
that's interesting.
I've always said I get along with Democrats, Otis. You know that.
Well, the interesting thing is, the thing that I keep pointing out is that when they asked Ron Paul who did he talk to in Congress, he said he talked to Dennis Kucinich.
Yeah.
And I've thought that I kind of agree with Chomsky. The Republicans and Democrats are the incumbent party, sort of staging differences. Although I think right now there's some kind of major issues that are splitting the two parties. But what we mostly heard from the Republicans is just resistance to Obama, rather than any kind of substantive alternative or even agreement or amendment or something like that. It seems to be just opposition.
Yeah, one of the most divisive times in our country's history right now, I find comfort in true liberals, even as a big small government, frankly a libertarian Republican. I find comfort when I run into true liberals, the same ones who wanted to impeach George Bush, now want to impeach Barack Obama for the same things. And that's really important for me to see that there is some ideological consistency and that it's not all partisan. Granted, a lot of them have disappeared, and that's disappointing, but every time I find one, they keep me going, they keep me motivated.
Well, I mean, there are things that, well, of course, Ron Paul I was going to mention abortion. He was opposed to abortion, and yet the structures that the Republicans have been pushing all over the country essentially increase the size of government in order to, police this whole abortion thing. And I would have trouble seeing how that fits into a libertarian point of view, which is essentially what you do is your own business, unless it intersects the public, welfare.
The core issue of libertarianism, and this was what Ron talked about, is that, I should say Dr. Paul, I do not know him on a first-name basis. What Dr. Paul talked about was how the sanctity of life, both, at any point in one's life, is essential, is a core issue to libertarianism. So, really, I think that issue could go either way. There are a lot of pro-choice libertarians, there are a lot of pro-life libertarians. And it makes sense to me either way. I understand both arguments. Thankfully, I'm not running for office where I need a vote on abortion, because that's one of the most difficult issues for me to make my mind up on.
Well, it just seems to me, just about this, that it really does come down. I mean, the effect of prohibiting abortion is back alley abortions. Women, this has been an issue ever since the beginning of time, that women essentially need to have control of their lives. And just given what the effect of that is, it seems to me you would want to think twice before.
That doesn't sound much different from the argument against prohibition.
Exactly, right? But prohibition is a wonderful experiment that didn't work and left a legacy of criminal empires.
Sure.
That affect us to this day. And we were seeing the same thing in the drug war.
Well, yeah, besides our defense budget, which is roughly 40% of the federal budget, it looks like the drug war is a big waste of money that is not only a waste of money, but more importantly, a waste of lives, a waste of innocent lives, both very good police officers, federal agents, and then, sometimes there are teenagers whose lives are ruined because of some innocent drug charge.
Well, in respect to the drug war, we're seeing more and more law enforcement people joining LEAP, the law enforcement against prohibition. People who are saying this doesn't work. A common statement from an officer is, "This is taking a huge amount of my time to lock up somebody who hasn't threatened anybody. Meanwhile, I'm not out there dealing with, the real problems that I was hired for."
Well, I've heard that America has the highest number of incarcerated citizens per capita.
We have 25% of the incarcerated people in the world.
Unbelievable.
Okay, we have, I think it is, I can't remember, there's 183 or, I think it's 100, no, it's 700 something for every 100,000. People in the population, and the population, the incarcerated population, is predominantly black and Latino. It doesn't sound like it, and of course it's expensive.
It's very expensive.
And at the same time, under Clinton, we started getting these private corporations running our prisons. And, that would be another question for a libertarian, just out of curiosity. A lot of stuff has been offloaded. What used to be KP in the military is now, ARA or, some large food company that does baseball games, and now they do the military. We've offloaded prisons. Hospitals are becoming more and more privatized. How do you see that?
As far as prisons go, it's really difficult for me to accept the idea that it would be a good thing for a society to privatize a prison, to create a profit incentive for every prisoner that you bring in. That would probably not fix our incarceration problem. Granted, I'm not a pure libertarian, nor as a 19-year-old college student do I have my mind made up on every issue.
But you're supposed to know everything you're going to do for the rest of your life now.
Yeah, politicians think they know that. That's where I differ from most politicians. I hope that I'm willing to say I don't know, and I may not know for a while. And right now, I don't have to be accountable for these issues to my constituents because my constituents are concerned with the schools and their kids. And, I'll make up my mind on those obscure issues someday down the line.
How are you seeing what's going on now? Just out of curiosity, and kind of your take on this. I don't know that the Republican legislatures all. Let's talk about gerrymandering. How about just that redrawing the map here in Texas? As you probably know, the Department of Justice, it wants to try to still deal with the map that the legislature came up with. How do you see this business of reorganizing the maps to ensure your continued control of whatever legislature you're in?
It's really amazing, actually, how much the drawing of the lines affects a congressional delegation. 49% of the state's vote could go for, actually really, a majority of a state's voters could vote for one party, and they could end up with with representatives from the other party, all of them.
This has already happened. I mean,
that happens all the time.
It happened in Michigan.
It's part of the system right now, and if there's a way to fix it, I don't know. I know that the system isn't perfect. I still believe that the American Constitution has laid out the best system in the world, but it's certainly not perfect.
Well, I mean, one of the things is freezing it at 435, when originally the idea was, well, you'd have, n number of people being represented, and somehow, I guess, freezing it at 435 creates a kind of a strange situation where you can't really get all of the disparate views in a given state represented. I mean, there are a couple of Republicans in Massachusetts, I know it.
Not in the congressional delegation, actually. We are represented by 2 Democratic senators and 9 Democratic congressmen and women.
Right, which probably doesn't reflect some of the opinions, say, in the western part of the state.
Sure.
Or even in Worcester, or in rural Massachusetts, which I think still exists in some places.
It's hard to remember sometimes that this state elected Mitt Romney as governor.
Right.
The guy who got, I think it was like 34% of the vote when he ran for president, which is pretty amazing, that the change in dynamic, not only in presidential years, but also the change in kind of a candidate's dynamic when he's on the national stage versus when he's running statewide. It's pretty amazing to see when we're talking about it obviously at least a 16-point drop, right? It's amazing.
But you elected Bill Weld, who was a moderate Republican, some years ago. I think he was accepted as a pretty good governor, and he was the guy who let what's his name, that caused Michael Dukakis all the problems. That was his bill. What do you kind of see? We got about 5 minutes. 4 minutes. What do you see? What would you be doing now if you were king? If you were John Boehner?
Oh.
Can you think about that? I mean, can you look
I
at
think
that?
I'd be resigning if I was John Boehner. If I was thinking for the good of the American society and the American people, I would be resigning if I was John Boehner.
Really? I mean, I think he has an impossible job, and I'm no fan particularly of John Boehner's.
Well, remember, I was on the convention floor when he read the results of a vote from a teleprompter and ignored what the results of the vote actually were. John Boehner, it's safe to say, is on my blacklist. I'm not a big fan of John Boehner.
I think we at Pacifica missed the story at the convention, which was, how can we keep the Paul delegates, invisible? It seemed to be the whole story of the Republican convention.
Oh, it was the whole story of the convention. It absolutely was. And, I'm definitely proud that we made our presence known down there. And you see kind of Rand Paul rising in this libertarian wing of the Republican Party. And Rand Paul, in a lot of polls, the front runner for 2016 for the Republican nomination. And it just shows how much of a shift has happened, even in the last 4 years.
How do you like Rand Paul?
I like Rand Paul a lot. He's certainly my candidate for president in 2016. He is not Ron. He's not as pure as Ron. Well, but the reason he's not as pure as Ron is because if you want to be as pure as Ron, you get stuck with 10% of the vote. And you can't do anything if you don't hold a seat.
Well, what do you think is his thing on the Southern Avenger? What was your take on that whole thing where he kept this guy on who was going around, with his ski mask on?
You talking about Jack Hunter?
Yeah.
I Jack Hunter's actually, he's a really, really smart guy who comes up with some very, very excellent pieces of analysis that, I actually haven't listened to him in a while, but I'm actually not even familiar with the recent story regarding Jack Hunter. I'm not sure I know what you're referring to.
I don't know. He's been featured on Rachel periodically, and one of the problems that I have is, the Obama administration has done this, is that when somebody says something we don't like, maybe the remark that could be taken as racist, which is a big one now, we fire them.
Oh, yeah.
Shirley
Or
Farrar,
we detain them under martial law. I said, or we detain them under martial law thanks to the National Defense Authorization Act of 2012, which I'm sure you've discussed on this show.
We have, but I haven't discussed that particular issue. Was there somebody who did that?
Well, no. I think we were talking about earlier the definition of the word enemy.
Enemy, right.
It reminded me of the National Defense Authorization Act of 2012, which was signed into law December 31st, 2011, on New Year's Eve when no one was paying attention. And two little sections, sections 1021 and section 1022, allows for the American military to detain indefinitely even an American citizen if they're deemed to be associated with the 9/11 attacks, even if they're just deemed to commit a belligerent act. And there's no definition for any of these terms.
And we can just deem them.
NDAA.
I like
you might as well detain them.
Deeming.
That's what we can do.
Well, we're out of time, Evan. I want to thank you for taking this time and kind of giving us a rundown. You still sound moderately sane.
A little bit.
I'm looking forward to more discussion with you. I'm finding it a breath of fresh air to hear points of view other than necessarily mine. Anyway, thank you, and really good luck with your work with the school. And let's see some, exciting things there.
Well, thank you very much, Otis.
Take it easy.
Yeah.
And we talked with Marjorie Cohn. I'm Otis, sitting in for Mark, who is away. And we spoke with Marjorie Cohn about the Bradley Manning event, and Evan Kenney, and a quick rundown on what I would call responsible libertarians see. This is not the Tea Party. We will see you next week.